Welcome back from lunch. And so the discussion for the next hour will be strategy development, business cases and securing funding. We'll get them to introduce themselves first of all. So I'm Stewart Clark, I'm chairing this session, obviously. I'm a physicist from Durham University and Deputy Director of the NHCIR. If each of you can maybe give a short resume of yourself, then we'll move on to some questions. So if we start at the far end.
Thanks, Stuart. So hi everyone, I'm Convey. I'm a Senior Portfolio Manager in EPSRC in UKRI. And my portfolio is mostly on capital infrastructure. So that covers national research facility, strategic infrastructure, core equipment, extra. But I also look after the priority in people and skills, and that's the relevance for my attendance being in the panel.
Hello everyone, I was in the first panel, but I'll introduce myself again. So I'm Arianna Ciula, I'm Director of King's Digital Lab, which is a research software engineering department within the Faculty of Arts and Humanities at King's College London. I have experience mainly in the application of computational methods in the arts and humanities and cultural heritage as a kind of research background, but also worked a lot on research facilitation and research management, and in particular as director, obviously also in elaborating the strategies, different kind of strategies for the team that I lead. So I guess that's why I'm in the panel.
Hi everyone, I'm Sophie Janacek. I'm head of the Digital Research Infrastructure Programme at UKRI. So UKRI is a very large organisation, but I have a central role working within the infrastructure team to help develop UKRI's approach to digital research infrastructure. And prior to my role at UKRI, so I've been at UKRI for 4 years, I was at the European Bioinformatics Institute, which is one of the largest data infrastructures for the life sciences. And there I headed up the research management office for 7 years. So kind of the other side, I guess, of the fence, applying for funding to support the resources at the institute.
Okay, cool. I'm Tobias Weinzierl. I'm from Durham University. And my research culminates all in one core software product where I built all my career around it, okay, that I started to write as a pre-PhD and still write on it whenever I have time. It has a few satellite projects, but that's the core. Now, I do understand this is not a strategy, but that's kind of my core business. And the strategy then has to follow, so I get money so I can continue working on this code because that's close to my scientific heart. Well, back to you.
Okay, thanks. So I've got a list of some questions here. However, please feel free to put your hand up if there's anything specific that you want to ask. I don't mind if you do it during they're talking, whatever. We'll come around with microphones and the like, rather than waiting to the end. But let's have this as sort of reasonably sort of open discussion. So if we could start off with. What would be the microphone? What would be the key challenges in balancing your strategic objectives with the need to sustain funding?
I can. So as I said, I have my code. Like so many computers, I mean, I'm not married to my code, I'm married to my wife, but number two is, like so I have, like many people in computational science, I would say, an emotional relationship to my code, okay? So very often, what I want to do as a scientist is I want to continue to work on that. So that means that when I get a research grant, usually the first thing I do is there some way to make this match to what I want to do with my code base? And when I find that, then I usually write an EPSRC whatever grant proposal, and then that gets rejected. Because what I hear back is, well, this is an engineering task. You basically just want to have money for some software development. That's not what we fund. So sometimes I'm cleverer than that. Sometimes I see, this is my code, this is what I want to do. I have this objective, and then I phrase it all as a really challenging research question and just basically say enough how I want to do that. So okay, I'm exaggerating. Basically what I'm doing is I try to hold myself back when I write the grants and I develop the strategies. Rather than thinking it all out, how would I like to program it, I try to focus on these big challenges now, and I try to actually avoid how would I do that in software. Sometimes it works, and sometimes I'm just carried away, and then I write another proposal, which is then not funded.
Maybe, maybe from a sort of UKRI perspective, maybe you can give some advice on how we can improve our strategies to secure funding from sort of your knowledge from the other side of it.
So I guess there's a few points here. I think one of them is about, and is a point I wanted to raise, that certainly from my time at EBI, I recognise that if you're maintaining and developing infrastructure, particularly it's an infrastructure that other people are using, there can be a tension between maintenance and then you don't always just want to be maintaining that infrastructure. You also want to be, looking to the future, maybe, I don't know, developing it so that it's easier to use or doing something much more ambitious than that. So I think from my time as a research manager, you have to try and see where you have to try and maintain agility, right? So sometimes funding may come in shorter time amounts than you would want, and then you think, well, okay, I have a long-term strategy, but how can that fit into that? Maybe it gives a bit more time to think about what I want to do in the long term. Maybe it can give me some time to do some trial projects and evidence what I can do in future grant applications. And yes, within the DRI programme, so from my UKRI point of view, we definitely see that the software ecosystem, we're keen to support that a bit better. So, I mean, I haven't applied for a grant for a long time, but my understanding, we hear that it can be easier to apply for, exciting new projects, right? If, would you write a grant just to support your software? That could be challenging. There have been some calls in that area, so we expect more calls to come out this year just for software maintenance, but also we have some trial projects to see how we could better support that whole environment in the future. And this could be new ways to fund software, it's new ways to fund people as well. And in terms, I'm trying to think if there's any more advice I can give on trying to secure funding, but I think it's really look into the details of the call, see if it's possible. Research data management related activities can be included in your grant application. If you're not sure what can be included, contact UKRI and really think about everything that you need to do within the grant and justify it as well. If it's very call dependent, but really read into it and see what could be supported, I'd say.
So, yeah, maybe I can add. So in terms of the lab that I lead, every year we draft a funding strategy. So in a way, the alignment between the objectives and the funding is already built in there. But that said, one of the main challenges, in addition to what you just said around leaving time outside maintenance and doing innovative stuff, is actually time for exploration. So that's one of the main challenges that I find to support the team in doing exploratory work, is how can I embed that into the, if you like, more core funding strategy, which tends to be projects that have to deliver something that is quite stable and robust. So the previous director of the lab managed to negotiate a 10% time for each contract in the team so that people have this 10% for exploration, but you can imagine that's not a lot. So one action that in the last 2 years we're trying to focus on is actually to develop a more RSE-driven research strategy within the team to identify specific research themes and have leads within the team of those research themes. Sorry, I can pronounce team and themes with the same Italian accent. And this has kind of helped us. It's obviously still work in progress, but it helped us to kind of strategize a bit more about the kind of things that we want to do and if you like, the technical aspects that are interesting in the research that we are engaged with. And so as kind of converge a bit better funding and research strategy together, if it makes sense.
Yeah, I was just going to add, so just to say, like, digital is not my area of expertise, But coming from the founder's rationale, going back to the base, I think what we want to have in the mindset is over the longer term, when the founder releases a call, it's either based on the community need or it's coming from the government priority. So always keep those two in your mind in terms of what's high in the agenda and where I can actually shape my research towards those. So you actually have got a target to work towards. And like what Sophie said, always check on the call itself, because across UKRI, there's just like various calls, even on the digital aspect. So each call is bespoke to a specific need or a specific government agenda. So you always need to actually tailor your approach, then meet the core assessment criteria.
Yep, so meeting the criteria is an important thing for any of the specific calls. You have to shape your, shape your grant into the aspect of that given call, ensuring you're actually answering every question in that call, don't leave any gaps. Excellent. So, if we move on a little bit and ask the panel, what makes a good business case? But also, I think, which is a much more interesting question as well, what makes a bad one? So it's good to give advice what you should do, but part of that advice is here's also what you shouldn't do. I think over time we've probably seen some things that you shouldn't do. So maybe pros and cons of business cases. What have you seen that's great? What have you seen that you wish you could have advised them otherwise? Who would like to go first with that one? Should we start at the other end?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if I've got like a bad example of business case, but you definitely have to go through rotating those. So in 2018, the government published the framework, the Blue Book. So they base on the 5 case model where you got the strategy case, got the economical case, then commercial, financial, and management case. So I think each of these aspects, you need to actually have a dedicated effort to look into the strategic fit to the business case, but also in terms of economical, how it's value for money for the public members in the society. And then going through that outline, then developing to the next stage, and then the full case, you probably have to go through a rotating of each stage, come to a state where you, as the applicant yourself, is satisfied before going to the next level. I pass on to my peer to see if there's any.
I can maybe talk a little bit more about the smaller scale business case, which are the ones that I mainly, obviously the generic framework is valid, I think, for everything. But in my case, I have to do a lot of business cases that are addressed to my own institution. So what make a good one? First of all, I think it's very important to know who has to approve those business cases. So as with everything, you need to know your audience and find out as much as possible about what matters to them, because then you can align. In my case, it's very important to know about the institutional strategy, again, the ins and outs, so that I can align my business case to those strategies, ideally the national ones, sometimes the international ones. It has to be short to the point, because usually the people that have to approve this stuff don't have much time. They're really senior management. Ideally with headings, divide key areas. If the business case is longer than a page, start with a summary. So sorry, very practical, but support with evidence. So if you have data, for example, around, in my case, I have to do quite a lot of business cases around new people and new hiring. So data around capacity planning, projections, inform by the data. So whatever you have that kind of supports that request. And if it's too long, include it as an appendix, but at least it's there, and ideally put visuals so that it's kind of comprehensive, also for those that might not be specialists in your area. Let me see if there is anything else that I didn't say. Clarify, obviously, the timeliness of your business case, the urgency, and the risks, very important. So you're not there just to say, oh, I want this, therefore you need to give it to me. But I like this, and these are the risks either way, right, whether I get it or not. because that, again, it's very much appreciated for those that have to make decisions and have to kind of counterbalance between different budget lines and so on. Ideally, give options with recommendations. I mean, this is the really bread and butter of business analysis, and state not only the tangible but also the intangible costs and benefits, which sometimes we forget to do. We tend to focus a lot on tangible costs and not intangible ones. In terms of bad ones, maybe I have just a few things. One is that don't be too long. Don't have too many preambles. I've done these mistakes before where I've started with stuff that was too long and then didn't get to the point. So it doesn't have to be basically difficult to read and parse, and I think this is valid for also funding applications for reviewers and so on. And you have to be clear about the benefits compared to the cost, I think. And also, yes, again, about recommendations and risk has to be clear and not kind of foggy.
Yes, yes. I would say when we mentioned sort of business case here, I think there is a large overlap with cases for funding as well, grant applications. It's, they're not really two separate things. There's a large overlap. But Sophie, if you want to
trying to think comments? If I can add anything. I mean, I think it's clear that it's quite a lot of work that needs to go into a business case, and from my experience, you know, there's no shortcutting any of that. It's a lot of work, and it's very clear to the reviewers, I think, if the approach hasn't been fully justified. In terms of, I mean, I guess I think a lot of the things I would consider are also appropriate for grant applications. Think about who your audience is and make it easy for them. You know, try and step away from the language that you would use. UKRI, we use a lot of acronyms. You have to think, who's reading this, will they understand them, and really show the impact that may be obvious to you but may not be obvious to the reviewer. So other things that I found helpful at UKRI and in my previous role in research management, expose your work to as wide a group as possible. So certainly your peers, people who understand your area, get advice from them. Definitely get advice from more experienced people, whether it's a business case or a large grant application. It's really invaluable, the advice they can bring. And consider talking to people outside your area as well. Like a lot of the strategy development we do at UKRI isn't just done with the digital leads within the research councils, it's done with other central teams like talent and skills, and the perspectives that they bring can really strengthen the case as well.
Tobias, you have anything to add?
No. Would like to ask a question. Can we maybe just like that hand? Who in the audience has to write business cases or grant applications? I think that's wrong. Everybody who works in our business contributes to business case and grant applications, okay? Sometimes it drives me crazy if people tell me, well, I'm a PhD student, I have my funding, I don't have to contribute towards the next fund. Well, somebody got the money in for your stipend or whatever. That was me. The reason that I might not be available tomorrow is because I have to write for the next generation. So it's just a matter of professionalism. We all contribute towards that business. Okay? It doesn't mean that you write that document yourself and you submit it. Well, I would sometimes like to have a little bit, so I don't like business, okay, as a general rule, but I would like, it's not my area, but I would like to have a little bit more of business awareness. Okay? Everybody who has ever done a PhD has benefited from someone writing a business case. Everybody who has an RSE job, somebody has written a business case for that. I think people should be aware of that and should try to return and see where they can make contributions towards that.
So if we actually just pause there for a moment, we've got a room full of people, many who put their hands up saying they've written business cases, grants, etc. Is there anything else, any wisdom that you would like to contribute to the moment? We have a panel, but we've also got a room full of people who have done such things. You know, would anyone like to contribute some wisdom and knowledge on how they've managed to either successfully get things through or lessons learned if you haven't? No one wants to be put. Oh, yeah, come on. The microphone's just coming over here. There we go. Yes. Yeah, no one likes to be put on the spot. Thank you for doing it.
Well, I started my career...
Stand up, please, we can see you.
I can see myself fine. Expect failure is one of the ones I've always told people. Because I remember my peak, I was doing 40% success, and that was high peak. And the previous stat at certain universities I was at, we almost had a 0% success. So, no comment, that's a long time ago. And so, yeah, and then the other one is get on the review panels. I don't think I need to mention this. It's peer reviewed, so I don't even ask the question how many people are on the, especially in the DRI community. We're getting it reviewed by people who aren't in this community, and that I've thought 10 years ago was a disaster, and now it's improved. But I don't know how many hands.
Actually, well, I mean that'd be a sort of interesting point. Who here has been asked to review a grant or a business case? So it's a few less than those who have to write them, but it's not zero. But yes, it's there's a whole community here who are experts in this field.
So this is actually something like that. This is contributing towards a business case, a research case in a group. Okay, so because at least in my institution, I need at least 2 people who have proofread it before I can hand it over to the research. To the research team, pre-award team, and this is obviously a valuable contribution if someone helps me with proofreading things, and that is kind of the level I think everybody can do.
This nicely sort of moves on to the next question. What influence does your team have in institutional strategic direction? So actually, it's not just you doing it. You expect your team to do it. Yeah. I can point to people, but would anyone like to volunteer to go first before I point randomly? Hey, thank you. I'll point at you then.
Me? I think I talked a lot. Sorry, I've some written down notes because I'm a bit tired today. But I think my team is quite lucky because we do have a lot of agency. But it doesn't mean that this does not require a lot of work to put together any kind of business/research strategy cases, especially from obviously me as director, but also the lab manager. So we have to rely on regular reporting and use that reporting again as data to kind of establish trust with senior management, whether it's faculty or college level. So that requires a lot of socialization. So attending many committees, delegate when possible, but every occasion to also contribute to faculty or college strategy is in a way taken on board because we know how important that is to then align our objective to that. A challenge that we face is that as senior management in academia, as you know, it's typically academic and not very business oriented. And in the disciplines we work with, I work with is mainly non-technical. So one element of if you like, of increasing that agency is to make sure that the embedded, in my case, an embedded RSC team is very well aligned with the central DRI provision, so that I can make sure in a way that whatever we do aligns with those good or best practices. And in the case of King's, the institution where I'm at, there is now a central provision for e-research, and one of the first things I did as director was to make sure that I had a co-line management, if you like, with that team. So I think this is valid for many other institutions to make sure that you have those connections in place. There's also the alignment with existing cross-faculty research institutes, which is quite important. So in our case, the lab is affiliated to a new Digital Futures Institute, and I think this has now become widespread. There's several institutions that have that kind of research institutes that focus specifically on digital research. I guess, again, in terms of challenges, all this requires a lot of networking within the institution. So line managers, I think, struggle sometimes. I struggle in making sure that, in theory, my half time, I manage to keep all this together. So I think, again, looking, not thinking, we are a good model, but thinking in terms of what should I look forward to, what should I focus on. I like to be more aligned with the national international strategy, and so this is why I'm here. I think it's a way to find out more about what the trajectories are and what the community is doing to kind of learn and grow.
Is there any changes you would recommend or made either within your own institution for developing strategies or to our UKRI colleagues who we interact with regularly on strategy?
Is it for me?
No, just sort of follow on. Is there
so one thing that, for
any
example,
changes?
I think that in terms of my own team, that I'd like to have more, I think I was discussing with some other members of the other participants, is that unfortunately, more often than not, the leaders in these RSC teams, they have also all the line management responsibilities, so that takes time off being more involved in strategic direction. So one thing that I'm trying to do is delegate more, or making sure that there is a structure so that others in the team also have line management responsibility, which is a way for them to develop their own career and their own, the opportunities really to develop others and therefore grow themselves, but also to a certain extent delegate a bit more their level of work that would then free time for other more interesting things.
Maybe if I ask towards the UKRI side now, with respect to sort of developing strategy, internally, what is that like? And also sort of the sort of question after that, what would you like to see change? What improvements do you think could be made? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, so I don't mind. I was going to say, from the founder's perspective, obviously, like, shaping policy and strategy is all we do. And quite a big portion of our job is go out in the community for university visits and find out what we actually specific need and how we can then tailor and adapt our approach to the community. What I always tend to think is the founder and the community is one. We're always beating one to decide to the government to say this is what we need. We're never separate. So what I want to encourage is that, because the policy and strategy evolves quite fast in the pace according to, you know, who's in power. Like, say, for example, the 5 critical tasks defined by the previous government is now got the additional 2 lenses on digital skills and net zero. So it's never set in stone, and the strategy is always shaped by having that integrated view and suggestion from the community. So I would like to think that we would always open our door to discussions from individuals like RSC, RTP, from the community. Having your contribution to our policy shaping is the key component of what we do.
And if
just trying to
stay with UKRI for the moment, yeah.
Just trying to think how I can build on that. Yeah, definitely. You know, come and speak to us and try and engage with us through various surveys and any other means, be on panels, that type of thing. Maybe I could talk a bit more about the digital research infrastructure strategy and how that's developed. Yes, so I mentioned I'm in a central team, and the DRI programme is really a cross-UKRI programme. So the aim of the programme is to really support foundational activities in digital. Now, the research councils will fund quite huge infrastructures, like very specialised infrastructures in certain areas. And the programme aims to support things like skills, software, things that everyone is interested in and are really critical. So to develop that, it's a complex process, but in essence, the research councils come together. We go through various means to work out what the priorities are. Certainly, I think the number one priority across the board is around skills. There are other priorities as well. And we also engage across UKRI to get feedback from experts in other areas, such as around skills and open research as well. So a lot of the work that we do as a team is across UKRI working and collaboration. And I think you also had a follow-up question, didn't you, on sort of what we would like to... I forgot to mention, we also have governance around the programme as well. So we have an external advisory board called the Advisory Group for DRI, the AGD, and we get a lot of input and feedback from them, as well as some other external engagement as well. In terms of what we would like to see change, I've written down something here, statement of requirements. So We would like the community to be able to engage more directly with the programme, and this year we'll be launching, I'm not sure what the final name of it, but if you see my colleague Santiago at the meeting later this week, he'll be able to tell you a bit more. But it's a way for anyone to write in and provide feedback to the programme around if you see there are gaps, things that we should be addressing. So look out for that being announced, I'd say, probably within the next 6 months. I think it's statement of community need is probably the phrase you want to look for.
And if we come back into academic setting, are you anything else you'd like to add there?
I'm happy.
And just at the end of that question, I noted that some folk put up their hands last time about developing strategies and putting in cases for sport, etc., but quite a lot different. Are you happy with the status quo? Is there anything else you would like, you'd like to see changed? Yeah. Is there any sort of things that are in your way for essentially you carrying out the type of job and the way that you would like to see it? Yes, there's a hand went up very quickly. Let's go for there. Oops. Yeah.
I guess I better stand up. I guess it's not some of that. It's just that. So my job is skills. That is my remit. That is my sole remit. But I see an awful lot of things being funded that kind of potentially overlap slightly. And I kind of wonder, is there a meta piece of work that's actually looking at that and looking at what's complementary and what goes together? Because even some work I'm involved in, I know people that are doing very similar things, and there's almost competing grants going in at the same time that are kind of together. And there seems to be, we don't really quite know what works in this space, yet we're just churning out these grants to do almost kind of the same thing again and again. So is there going to be that piece of meta work? I keep forgetting to write a bit to do it. That's actually going to look at this and kind of go, is there a bit of an evidence-informed piece that we can do around this upskilling and programs and approaches at different levels, because it requires at a different level. What we do for novices is different for intermediate and advanced and professionals, and what that kind of looks like really. Because, yeah, skills calls are great, but that's only one piece of the picture.
Would anyone like to?
I think that's yours.
I think I was more aimed towards UKRI there than academia, I think.
Yes, so I guess there will be, I think some of this is us trialling approaches to see what works, and there will be evaluation to assess what's worked well, and I'm trying to think what else to add. Hopefully it's a positive thing, I guess, that there's funding for this area, but I can understand that maybe navigating it, if you're looking what to apply for and deciding what's best, could be challenging. There have been, I think, a few calls funded by the DRI programme, so there was a mechanism where we worked through the best way to deliver those, so there is coordination, I guess, at the programme level.
Yeah, I just chip in what Sophie said. I echo, it's probably quite a challenging landscape for everyone to navigate and actually look out for the individual core schemes you actually need that's tailored to you. But the overall UKRI travel of direction is actually towards harmonisation. So we do now have the DRI directorate, which we didn't used to have. So we are aiming to look at across all the councils how we can actually have a more sort of like widened scheme or course to actually have those criteria embedded in one, and then that avoid having the community to actually go through what's the remit, what's the portfolio. But then that said, if you look at the scale, the size, the capability of what you are looking for, then of course we'll have different, cores or schemes to suit those needs. So it either be, say, local, regional, or national, or international. So there's bound to be always differences in like cores and schemes. But I think having that mindset of looking into what size, what capability I'm looking for, probably helps to start initialize what you want.
But maybe if I can add on an element of frustration sometimes from the academic/research communities, that there are sometimes these scoping calls that people apply for, and the idea is that you do your scoping, you study your audiences, your community, and then you propose some recommendations, but then there's no follow-up calls from those scoping calls that allow you to then grow it, and so you start again from scratch, and so you start again with the landscaping and so on. So there has been a bit of fatigue, I think, and I can speak here on behalf of maybe some communities, not others, that might have been more advanced, in that we do a lot of scoping, but then we don't get into the next step. And I'm sure some people in the audience, I know of some people that have that experience with that.
Excellent. I was about to open it to the audience, but if you continue, then we'll do just that. Yeah.
No, I do want to acknowledge from inside of the founder perspective, one challenge is in terms of the ownership of budget. So that's quite often where we hit the barrier to say how we can have a harmonized line to suit all the individuals in the community, because say, for example, EPSRC has got this pocket of money, and then UKRI, DRI has, and then our individual teams has got the infrastructure budget. It's in terms of how we can actually all sit together thinking about the bigger picture. That's the challenge. Because if we do have that harmonized opportunity, then that provides the challenge of who is owning which proportion or percentage. When the outcome is there, how do we then say what benefit realization is attributed to which team or which, thing? So I think that's always been the challenge in the councils.
With the digital research infrastructure, I'm actually quite happy that there is some overlaps. Okay, if it were all homogenized, what would that mean? Just let's thought experiment. And it would mean all goes to one or two institutions. If you are in that institution, good for you. Okay, everybody else then has a little bit lost out because they can't shape it anymore. I personally very much doubt that there is one upskilling whatever strategy for everybody. I don't want to sit in a room with humanities people. That's not because I don't like them. They speak a different language. Okay, my needs are different, and that's fine. Okay, see, by the way, exactly the other way around as well. We sit then together in the pub, but they need their, you need different things for different communities, and so I'm very happy that there is a certain overlap. Also, if you have only one, then you try out only one way to deliver, for example, training. And there has to be a lot of different training, to be quite frankly. We don't know what is the best training, the best way how to deliver training. So let's do it a couple of times. We're going to find out what works best. And by the time we have evaluated it, probably evaluation will be wrong because people change and requirements change. But that's okay, I mean, as long as we do that thing, I'm happy.
Oh no, I just meant there's a couple of things that are very similar that are happening in very similar places that are kind of
overlapping. Well, that is then the problem of people, that they don't think outside of the box and of the, what is the equivalent to an editor in a board. If you have different refuse, they might, and I think that's the risk, isn't it? If you don't think outside of the board and you know that there's 3 other bits, well, then you compete to a certain degree. So I like actually the fact that we have to think what will others put in. It helps, it helps to think new ways, and so I'm happy.
Yes,
it's more work, but that's okay.
Yeah, this microphone there, yeah.
Hi. So I think we all do some training, upskilling. We repeat things we do quite often in institutions. Some meta study would be absolutely great, I agree. Mm-hmm. But what I think in my 10 years of experience was becoming painfully obvious that we should have degrees corresponding to new needs. Does UKRI have any ways of influencing how institutions actually build their programs, degree programs? Can they suggest in some way this type of development at institutions?
Would anyone like to make a comment on that question?
So I was going to say, I'm not aware of any sort of intention for us to mandate guidance, but I would point to my colleague just towards the back of the room, Afia. So she is actually leading digital in terms of like software for our team. I don't know, Afia, if you have got any sort of like UKRI level. Sorry to put you on the spot.
I'm sorry, I was working, so I missed the question.
Do you want to repeat your question?
Right, so it is becoming a bit obvious that we need to supply students with the skill profile that suits the DRI needs for, future decades. But quite often, putting through a new master's program or an undergraduate program is super hard and requires dedicated people and dedicated personnel. So there is this disconnect between what the country needs, what universities are doing quite often. And, my institution is aiming for these like high needs, like net zero and AI, but they're forgetting the base layer, like good DRI professionals. Do you have any ways of influencing what's happening at UK institutions? That's a question.
Yes, absolutely. So I think, yes, can you hear me? Oh, sorry. Yes, so there's a number of ways we're taking this sort of feedback. We've been, obviously, through working with UKRI, DRI, we are developing research technical professional skills development courses. Within university, we have obviously invested in a lot of projects, some of which have actually started to embed research outcomes into curriculum. So they're building undergraduate programs, postgraduate programs that are actually facilitating that skills development within their own universities, which will hopefully then be uptaken by, say, industrial project partners and things like this. But yes, definitely we are working on the skills side much more. So one of the ways what we can do is, as Lee mentioned, is to bring communities together. And we have, for example, opportunities like the town hall event that we're organizing at the end of this month, an opportunity for you to tell us exactly what your needs are, and then we can embed that within our, not just EPSRC, but UKRI strategies, how we can work together across council. So there's a way for you to influence us, but then once we hear the feedback and we collect that evidence, then we can obviously go back to not just DSIP, but as the Department for Education, for example, and take that knowledge further. So we are trying to work across different government departments as well to try and influence that strategy. But it is a full circle, and I suppose we need to do more of this talking. So it's not just between academics and us, but policymakers, and it needs to go full circle. So more opportunities like this, I would say. But yes, we are. It's just a start, I would say.
Well, thank you for your addition to the panel. Yes. Okay, I think we'll do a few questions from the online folks on Slido. And I quite like the top question, so please feel free to express your frustration as much as you like on this one. Government priorities change due to sort of politics.
Well, in the UK also the government changes every now and then, but that's it.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on how can we reduce our exposure to this instability.
Can I start with a positive? I think the positive is definitely that there's a very strong interest in digital that we've seen, in the previous government and the current government, and I think, let's seize that opportunity. Maybe the nitty-gritty of that strategy may change, but yeah, the interest in digital will not, and that doesn't just mean computers. If you saw the recent announcement yesterday around AI, there's a lot of discussion around skills there as well. So I would see it as a positive, actually. Yeah.
Yes, current one is the announcement yesterday. I think, there's a room full of folk here who should now be feeding into strategy. Money is about to become available, and if you sit there and let it happen, then it's not coming your way. There's a folk who should be. If this room here isn't interested in a digital infrastructure and the financing of it, then I don't know what this room is. Yeah? I think it's actually important that people here, even if you didn't put your hand up to that earlier question, actually feed into the strategy in the way that they think it should be. We have, this week we've got UKRI colleagues here who you can collar, even when they collar each other. Use this as an opportunity. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of the politics like iteration, even though we have different governments, but fundamentally, when we look at research and science agendas, it doesn't shift very much. Like this time, when Labour got in power, then they added the 2 elements of the 5 critical tag. So for our community, it's always coming from the initiative coming from ourselves instead of saying what the politics are saying, what is the priority. So I don't think when there's a change of government, it should fundamentally change what we do.
There was, though, a lot of instability after Brexit, right, in terms of at least the European funding. So that was, I think, an exception in that changed and created a lot of instability, especially for institutions that rely on European funding. But fortunately, again, we're in a different moment now, but at least in terms of contribution to the Horizon program and so on. But that, I think, was a very challenging moment for some research lines that rely a lot on European funding.
Yes, I think it's sort of correct there, and that we actually do have an opportunity now, despite the question being stated in a somewhat negative. There is a positive, that, at least from yesterday anyway, I think. Yeah. Then we have to add. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, one thing I was going to add on is that so in terms of building that relationship and then pivoting the priority to what we want. So one route is that as founders, we have that regular conversation with DC and the government, but also I think we should really value in the community that your own relationship that you build with the government departments, because quite often when we have conversations, we find out what DC and the government department really value is directly coming from the experts in the community. So yeah, do value the unique relationship you have built with the government directly.
Would anyone else like to add anything on that comment, or I think I'll for the last 10 minutes move on to one more question. There we go there. Matt.
It wasn't my question, but just picking up on the question, I was wondering what the views of the panel were on other sources of funding apart from government and UKRI. Is that a way of diversifying and reducing our risk?
I can start just simply by saying, I mentioned that we do this annual funding strategy, so one of the objectives of that is exactly to diversify the portfolio. So obviously there will be channels that tend to be there all the time, like UKRI funding, European in our case, at least the ERC and that kind of funding. But in addition to that, we try and make sure there is alternative. So this space I work in, Arts, Humanities, Cultural Heritage, as a kind of plethora of smaller funders that goes all the way from professional societies to more creative sector like Arts Council and stuff like that, lottery fund and so on. So even if we're not as lucky as STEM in terms of the amount and the stability of the funding, we try to make sure that we diversify, and especially on the impact element, we pick also other areas, and also in terms of maintenance, because a lot of the research funders are not really interested usually in maintaining things that work and are functioning already for the research community as they are, without necessarily being too innovative.
I realize that what I'm saying is a thorny issue because of politics that were made a year ago, but for universities, the major problem is not, the research funding is important, okay, but the major income is teaching. Okay, so actually running for research grants diversifies our income. Now, one of the things we can ask ourselves in the digital research environment is to which degree do we play that game, or do we contribute towards the teaching environment? And I think this, sometimes I have the impression that in our universities things have separated, you know. Somebody from finance doesn't care at all, and from the finance department doesn't care at all what is happening on the teaching side. And similar things happen in some digital research infrastructure groups in universities. Don't care about the teaching because that's not the area. But the teaching is the main income that secures our job. Okay? So it's all fine if you tell me, well, I'm not an academic, I don't have to do anything to do with that teaching. But that's a little bit like working at BMW and saying I don't care about cars. Okay, because I am in the marketing division. Marketing is probably bad in the finance division of BMW. That's not how it works. So sometimes I think that this might be one of sometimes it might be good to rethink that. What is the core income of universities, at least, and that's teaching.
And maybe to add to that, I mean, I don't know about your institution, but King's and other institutions are also thinking a lot around the area of professional education, and that's an element that really bridges with the DRI space. Mm-hmm. So we can create new professions beyond academia, and what the role are of DRI professionals in training this new workforce. So I think it's an area that will become more and more important in the DRI space, both as a kind of income, diversifying income for universities, but also indeed bridging professions and the new labor, the new generation of DRI professionals, the mobility across sectors. I
think that actually perfectly swings us into the next question for the last few minutes, if you don't mind. Where's it gone? Oh, it moved. Now, it was seconds, now the third one. So for early career researchers, there's an urgency over funding and development. So we're almost starting to touch on that. So how can DRI proactively reduce this uncertainty and risk to sort of proposals and so forth? So, and essentially, us as a DRI community, how can we support our early researchers? As I think it's a more general question of what's going on there. It was a second, third question down now. So, generalise it. How can we support our early career researchers in DRI? DRI is a relatively new community. Yeah, you know, what can we do to support the folks, the up and coming people in our area? Who would like to pick up on that?
So I start.
Yeah, please.
I have to admit it's quite a challenging outlook at the moment. So in EPSRC, we previously had the fellowship scheme to provide ECRs specifically to have that opportunity to explore a proportion, say 30% of what you want to do. And that can be software, can be hardware, can be data. But we have recently, I'm sure some of you will have known already, that post our fellowship scheme. How that escalates down to individual funding pockets to EPSRC is then individual teams are looking at how then we look at support for RSE and RTPs without the fellowship scheme. So for example, my team in 2024 have done a research technical professional core, which was dedicated just to support research technical professional and RSEs. And I can see some of you have been successful awardees sitting in this room as well. So it's really, again, how you then navigate or help your ECR in your team to navigate this complicated funding landscape. So that's just within EPSRC. I don't know if you have got any UKRI side, Sophie.
Sorry, I think I misunderstood the question. Can you rephrase it again?
Yeah. Yes, so the support for ECRs in DRI space.
So I think from the DRI programme side of things, we work more on, we don't have a fellowship programme or anything like that. We work more on the sort of, we think about culture change. So we fund events like this to bring people together. We fund things like the Network Plus. So there was one of the calls over the summer was the Digital Research Technical Professionals Network Plus, and that was to bring together cohorts of different types of digital RTPs to work together. So I guess that's, we take that sort of more, I guess it's more of like a trying new ways of working kind of culture change aspect. And I think of going back to sort of how the wider community can support those early career researchers or technical professionals, I think it's about including them in everyday today activities, you know, so maybe encouraging them to get involved in the grant writing process. It's useful to be involved in that, even if it may not sound perhaps initially that exciting. You can see how to get your projects funded in the future, encouraging them to come to events like this, and yeah, including them in other activities, encouraging them to get involved with you know, UKRI panels, if that's a possibility. We mentioned that earlier. So I think all of these things are ways that you can also give people opportunities to build that soft skill set.
Maybe I can say something about so in our case, I think that that's actually a challenge sometimes for the DRI teams that work especially on the advanced, so say RSC teams that have a lot already of design and development work to do. So how do you then support early career researchers? So in our case, for example, if I'm lucky, I'm able to maybe host 2, either postdocs or early career researchers in the team per year, but that already kind of has to rely on the time of the rest of the team to mentor or support them. So I think I really welcome some of the funding that is looking at these platforms such as the Step Up that I know, Jeremy, you're going to talk about later on, that is trying to build connections between institutions, for example, via secondments, or way to embed people that might need exposure to certain practices in more advanced teams, because without that support, at least in the reality I work in, is quite difficult to build those connections. So unless you have teaching departments that are investing a lot in DRI training, and we heard that offer still has a lot of gaps, so unless you have that, there is actually a gap in that upskilling, let's say. So it'd be good to see more in that space. So if the fellowship program is not going to be funded anymore, find alternatives to that, such as these technical platforms or Network Plus or other means to make that happen.
Okay, I think we're coming close to our hour. I don't want to get in the way of anyone's coffee. However, is there any other questions from the floor on strategy, funds, financing, etc. Alan is at the back sticking his hand up wildly. I think he wants to say something. Go for it, Alan.
So I've just kind of been observing from the back and just feeling like just how this session is kind of going. And obviously, we're a whole bunch of digital research infrastructure professionals that have all come here for common purpose, you know, and development in our area. And there's a whole load of calls that are coming out around this particular thing. And yet, like, you know, a tiny fraction of the room felt that they were really, like, these are things that we should be applying for, right? In terms of, it is my job I can do this at a local level, you know, and build a team that can build a credible response to some of these things. And I think this is one of the reasons why we put together the retreat, is that actually it is, you are the experts at these things, and in many ways we need to help you articulate some of the things that are really important in terms of developing you in your profession so that you can take those things forward. What I've been really interested in, sort of like discussions sort of just over coffee or whatever, is things that would help you take you from where you are now to a position where you feel that you would be empowered to actually respond with support, you know, to one of these calls, whether, you know, in terms of, you know, the skills development, things like that, because it kind of feels like there's kind of two sides that aren't kind of coming together here, you know, within this community. But that's just me sitting here, like, just thinking.
I'm not even fully. I've got one, like a toe in the community.
Microphone, please.
I have a toe in the community, and I agree. Sorry, doing it. You still won't see me, I'm too short. I feel that maybe I can see the value of the panel and the expertise that we've got in the room, but I just wonder if it might be useful to have those panellists on the table so that you've got less of a barrier between the people that you're trying to get to apply for the calls and the people who are experts in the strategy and how you get the funding, because that way you're directly communicating with the people that
that you need to. And I think that might take away some of the barrier of feeling a little like a lecture, or this is how you do the thing, rather than the practical application of how we do it as people.
I can see where you're coming from, but to be honest, I never got an email, an answer to an email from mine that said, go away. Yeah, no, it was always the other way around, that at the research conference, everybody was happy to chat with me. And when I had questions, I think the door is open, you have to step through.
Yeah, just to echo that as well, you know, if you see us at these meetings, the reason we're here is to talk to you, and it's one of the great joys that I take from my job is talking to people, what they do, what they enjoy, so any question is welcome. And, you know, I appreciate that sometimes if you're looking at a funding call, looking at the website, there's maybe not a picture of a friendly face there, but honestly, if you've got questions, maybe it's about a grant application, then contact the team that's involved and they'll be happy to have a chat with you. So, yeah, please come and talk to us.
And I'd like to think that everyone here is very much open to any form of discussion and collaboration and going ahead with possible future grant applications and new strategies and so forth. That's why we're all in this room, I think. And which, is there one more before coffee?
I just want to do a quick check with a show of hands. How many RTPs in the room know that you can actually lead an application? Okay. And do you get enough support from your institutions to be able to lead? No? Yeah, so this is where the conversation needs to happen within the institutions and within, so you can approach academics and say, well, you know, I've never led an application before, I'd like to do that, you know, can I get some help? Can I maybe become a researcher co-investigator or co-lead? And then, you know, you right from the beginning have the support on how to write an application, but not actually lead, but, you know, that's just a stepping stone to the next step. So that's one of the ways. And just to add a little bit more on the ECR point before, so we've obviously mentioned a couple of network pluses. There are a whole lot of network pluses that we've invested in, and networks across UKRI. It's a really useful tool for early career researchers or anybody actually within the research ecosystem to test new ideas, small ideas, and just, you know, again, another stepping stone to learn new things, new ways of working. So I'd encourage you to check the different networks out there. For example, if you are doing, I don't know, work on computing, but don't understand the security aspects of things, you can reach out to the Sprite Plus, Network Plus. And, you know, reach out, ask for funding. That doesn't have to go through huge assessment panels or, you know, long processes. So that's just one aspect. We've introduced mobility aspects to the grant, so you can, you know, if you haven't got a specific skill, you can, you know, go and work in another institution in an industrial area. You can join catapults as a researcher. What's the program called? I can't remember now. It's basically sort of training within catapults on research grants where you work, you know, more closely with SMEs, for example. There are a whole host of different ways of working in a research capacity. So, and if you're not sure, speak to us and we can point you to the right direction. So yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of those points. Thank you.
There's a quick one here.
I'd like to have the last word, but I see one potential drawback for us here is that we don't have necessarily the same industrial relationships as maybe long-term academics may have. I think that I find personally very difficult. I don't know whether the room is finding that difficult. Any of those are necessary, not just the large players, but SMEs as well. So if we could support one another as this community somehow to develop that capability, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Yeah. Just before we finish, if we can thank the panellists for being put in the spotlight. Okay. Thanks, folks. Coffee break, I think it is, isn't it? Yes.